Hello, I'm Sol, and welcome to The Interesting and the Interested, which is a video series in which I interview people about cool and interesting and underrepresented things that they're doing, that they are, that they believe, or that they just want to talk about and hopefully have some measure of experience in. I ask lots of annoying and hopefully interesting questions, and we make a video out of it. Today I'm interviewing my friend Charlotte Robinson about ethnomusicology. Please forgive the sort of technical foibles in this video. It was the first one I made, and so there may be a few jumps and starts. Okay, enjoy. Right, so hello Charlotte.
Hi.
Would you like to say a little bit about yourself and why you want to talk about ethnomusicology?
Okay, so I'm Charlotte. I am an ethnomusicologist and a folk musician and folk dancer, Tolkien nerd, and generally very interested in anything I can get my hands on. I study ethnomusicology, which is the study of music in its human and cultural context. So, who's doing music, where they're doing it, and why they're doing it, and why it's important to them.
Why is it so important?
Well, I think anything that allows humans to know why they make music and why other humans make music is important. The benefits of music and dance on the brain and on social cohesion and on general enjoyment of life, I don't need to go into those right now, but it's important, I think, to know how people and music work together, because it can tell you a lot about a culture, it can tell you a lot about individuals, it can tell you a lot about social dynamics, and it can tell you an awful lot about how the world works in general.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things that I was kind of interested to discuss when you were talking about this, and one of the things that we discussed in the video that got next, was about the difference between ethnomusicology and musicology as terms.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, part of the question is, are they the same thing? Is one just an outdated version of the other? Are they related? Do they come under the same study?
Yeah. They both fundamentally are studying music.
Okay.
Traditionally, there is a difference. Traditionally, musicology had the musical object, the sound object, or the instrument, or the score as its central point of focus with the context around it, and ethnomusicology looks at an entire situation and considers every aspect of it. Musicology does generally rely on things in the past, and ethnomusicology is often talking about things in the present. I think the past and the present do exist and have an extraordinary amount of relevance for both musicology and ethnomusicology. It's just a question of where the emphasis is and how the information is used. And you can get some very present and future orientated musicologists and some very past oriented ethnomusicologists. So it's as I said, it's the more you try and name the differences between musicology and ethnomusicology, the more you realise that they're not really that different at all.
Okay, that's interesting. You talking about the traditions and the way the past and present are very linked in this has kind of made me think, made me wonder, because when you think about quote-unquote modern music, there's quite a wide perception that it's quite homogenous, even though that's not actually the case. But a lot of people, you'll go to a concert, a rock concert or whatever, and that genre will be quite, even though obviously there are differences everywhere, there will be quite a lot of common things that are shared. Whereas if you go back to the kind of more traditional music, then there seems, certainly on the surface, possibly not to be a lot more variation. So is there kind of would you say there is a sort of richer seam of information to mine when it comes to traditional music, or do you think it's just as relevant to study the kind of modern, I guess, pop music that, even if it's not necessarily pop music, that cultures are doing today?
I think there are an awful lot of cross-cultures going on at all points in history and in all places all over the world. I think the globalisation and homogenisation of music is definitely an issue that we're kind of tackling as ethnomusicologists and as music scholars more widely, so music psychologists are tackling some of this too. Popular music is popular because of people. The more you dig down, the more you find it's not the same. So we were studying Chinese rock a few weeks ago, and some of the very specific political roles that it took around the Cultural Revolution and the Tiananmen Square massacre and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, there are the uses of pop music and the roles it takes in all sorts of contexts are really interesting. So you look at Native American rap and hip hop, and that's talking about some very specific issues, and Hawaii and some of the Hawaiian music, so Hawaiian protest songs, like I said, but also hip hop in Hawaii. Various things of, you know, what are ostensibly the same genre are being used by all sorts of people to make all sorts of points, whether it's questions of a social identity or a cultural identity or a protest or whatever it might be. The same basic building blocks are actually infinitely malleable into something that will work to say whatever you want it to say, really.
That makes sense. So, obviously there is, historically, I guess there has been kind of a very kind of colonialist attitude from a lot of white Western researchers as, oh, we'll go out and study these other cultures and aren't they interesting and barbaric? And I'm sure that must play a role in the history of musicology and ethnomusicology. How much does that still carry over and how much is that still a problem today?
I mean, the idea of the noble artistic savages is one of the most irritating things about reading early ethnomusicology. I remember saying to a couple of my friends when I was starting out my course, I swear, if I read the word primitive one more time, I'm going to hit something. It's maddening to a 21st century mind seeing this kind of hugely colonialist attitude. I'm learning to see it in the context it was in. This was the way of the world. It was wrong. We need to fix it. We are very, very, very late to the game on fixing it, but we can and we should. Knowing that we have to fix it is the easy bit. Actually fixing it is the more difficult bit. And there are several movements at the moment going on to essentially decolonise ethnomusicology. I mean, historically, ethnomusicology it came out of the academic institutions of the West. So in the beginning, it was about comparative musicology. That was the term towards the end of the late 19th century, and it was about finding musical universals. It was about saying, look, they're not so different from us. There's this idea that you could notate African drumming rhythms from Ghana in Western notation, and I mean, looking at it as a musician, it's a slightly hilarious thing until you realise that actually this doesn't work, and this idea that everything can be reduced to the same notation system. I can see what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
I don't like it or agree with it necessarily, but I can see what they were aiming at. In a world where white Western voices are still disproportionately loud, there are also ethnomusicologists using this basically in the favour of the people who are not being listened to. So there's a thing called advocacy ethnomusicology, where a musicologist will go to, say, South Africa, where the conservation areas were made up and the native peoples were sort of chucked out around the edges, so in the name of conservation, and looking at the ways that songs changed and were lost and were invented and reinvented, and looking at it and saying, look, these people are here. This is what their music is doing and saying. This is what it is saying about their lives, and you should listen to them.
I'm going to move on from this a bit, but there is one thing that I'm quite interested in, and obviously I realise you may not be able to give me an answer on this, but do you think that people studying ethnomusicology are kind of more likely to gravitate towards studying traditions they don't have anything to do with, or they don't come from, or the opposite, or does it just vary too hugely to say?
It varies hugely. For a long time, ethnomusicology was kind of associated with studying world music and look at this thing that we don't know anything about. And
because I know you, for example, you're very interested in Scandinavian music,
yes.
which is obviously is kind of within the remit of world music. God, I hate that term, but
yes,
but it's not what a lot of people would think of as world music.
Exactly. For a long time, all the ethnomusicologists I knew were studying the Middle East, Javanese gamelan, Australian First Nations music, all sorts of stuff. And it took me a very long time to realise that actually there are ethnomusicologists studying English folk music. And part of the move towards studying more local traditions actually came about basically because of funding. Funding is drying up. People can't afford to go to far-flung places anymore, so they look at what's happening on their doorstep. And that's led to there was some really brilliant stuff going on. I think one of the first big studies was a study of the musical life of Chicago by academics living there who couldn't go elsewhere. And I'm like, well, actually, there's a whole pile of stuff happening in this city, and it was a really great thing. The more the world gets worried about where people come from and what right that gives them to be anywhere in particular, the more important it is, I think, to realise that people make music and that there is a certain universality about human beings making music.
So what is to be gained from studying it in this way, and what makes it something that is necessary to be done in a very kind of study-y, academic-y way? Because the other thing that you kind of talked to me about in the run-up to this was how you felt that it was an important thing and it should be able to be discussed both in academic and in human, which I love that phrasing. and I do think that's an important point, because how can we discuss this as human? I mean, you said yourself that people will look at you and go, ethnomusic, what? Like, how do we have this conversation among ourselves, like, outside of the academic sphere?
When you break it down to humans making music, there are all sorts of ways to experience it. Like there was a discussion I had a while ago about what musicology is and what it does, and there are all sorts of things. People who go and study other musics are essentially engaging in ethnomusicology. They are learning about a music and its culture, because you cannot simply learn an Indian raga without understanding what a raga is, why it exists, who made it, where does it come from. You can't do it without the context. I don't think it has to be studied to the deep critical levels that are demanded by an academic course to say, this is how humans do things. I mean, we talk about politics and the politics of a session. Who's running it, who gets to start tunes. That's a fairly standard conversation.
Yes.
That's exactly what I'm writing for my dissertation.
Yeah.
So we are undertaking a lot of the same activities. Just because we're not publishing them all the time doesn't, just because we're not presenting them at conferences, writing them for assessments, just because we're not doing those things doesn't actually mean that we aren't considering the same things as ethnomusicology. And I think sticking it into the box that assessed courses creates, when we don't do that, actually we realise we're basically doing it all the time.
So I guess in a way it comes down to how much do you go to things like that with your research hat on, and how much do you go with your participation hat on?
There's the inside and the outside perspective. So I could go into, something I don't know about, a Javanese gamelan performance, and I know tiny bits about sort of interlocking rhythms and cycles and things, but ultimately I would be watching it and I'd be like, well, I know what this sounds like, I know what it looks like, but I don't know what it is. And the inside perspective would be, say, me going to a Euro session and saying, well, this dance is this, and this is how it evolved, and these are the trends that are happening now, and this is the kind of music you play to it. And you can't divorce yourself from social links when you're studying ethnomusicology. There's the constant ethical dilemma of whether your observation of an activity is going to change that activity.
If a tree falls in a forest, etc.
Exactly. So it's it is something that ethnomusicologists are grappling with the entire time, trying to get inside and be outside at the same time. Because if you're outside, you can approach things a lot more critically than you can inside. And if you're trying to sort of say, well, so the expertise in this particular setting is concentrated towards these people and there's a reluctance to pass it on. People don't want to hear that. People don't want that said about them, and of course they don't. Why should they?
I can definitely see that there is a real value in sort of recording the history of the traditions and the way they're evolving and the way that they are part of their wider context. And so I guess it is just, as you say, a case of finding the balance between doing that and going, oh, I'm just going down to the pub for a sing, and I'm not just going to say, oh, this is really interesting that you're singing this song at this time, because do you know this happened at this time? And I'm like, oh, shut up, we just want to sing.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, not everybody feels that academic study is the way to understand these things. That's fair enough. There are a number of ways to understand any one thing at any time, I think, and I don't, there are people who have encyclopedic knowledges of folk songs and don't actually need or want to do anything more with that.
Yes.
And that's great.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you now feel you know a little bit more about the cool thing that is ethnomusicology. If you like this video and you'd like to see more, please hit subscribe on my YouTube channel, or follow my blog, which is iwishicouldrinkcoffee.wordpress.com. I post all the transcripts to these videos there, so if you don't want to watch the video but you want to read through it again, or you want to find a bit of the video that you liked, then you can do that. I also post about other random and hopefully interesting things there, like education and gender. If you or someone you know would like to be interviewed in one of these videos, if you have something you'd like to talk about, please get in touch with me. We can do an interview in real life like I did with Charlotte, or we can do an interview over video conference if that's not practical. Till then, I'll see you next time.